Oh, Neil, you're such a failure on so many levels. Just listen. Hey, you're at that age already. Just go bury your head in the sand and retire already because you're just embarrassing yourself. My God, you got future generations that are going to have to bury their head in the sand just for knowing you or just for being related to you. CBC News opinion, Neil MacDonald. Look beyond the jesters and you'll find real, live progressive conservatives in the CPC race. There are people vying for the conservative leadership who want to govern, not simply entertain. So, right? Okay, first of all, just in the headline alone, progressive conservatives, first of all, that's an oxymoron. Right? Conservative, think about what, look up the word. Like I always say, let's define the terms, right? Because anytime you're using whatever language you're using, you have to understand the words and terms that are being used before you can have an actual honest, objective opinion regarding any topic or subject. So what's a conservative? Look it up, you'll find out. All right? See what that means. Then look what a progressive is, which is just code word for a collectivist, right? But even the code word that they're using, progressive, is progress. Conservative. Progress. Right? Don't work. But really what they're really saying, when you're talking about a progressive conservative in Canada, which is quasi-socialist already in their political endeavors, all political parties in Canada are. But a progressive conservative, you might as well say is I don't know, a national socialist of some sort, right? That's somewhat fiscally responsible, I guess, right? Because to be a progressive is basically code for collectivists nowadays. You won't find anyone that identifies themselves as a progressive that don't fit into that overarching umbrella term, which is a collectivist. You know, the sacrifice of the individual for the greater good, right? Or groupthink, you know, democratic, right? Mob or majority rule, all that collective, completely collective. That's what they are. So a progressive collective is basically in a country, right, is a national socialist to a certain degree or to a certain extent. And in Canada, whereas we don't even have actual real property rights per se, but we do to a certain degree. But because there's always that underlying pretense where the government can step in and override all of your fundamental rights if they see fit, right? So whether it's, you know, property taxes, don't pay your property tax, you'll find out how much you really genuinely own your property, or eminent domain, right? So you think you own your home, but if the government decides they want to run a highway or a pipeline through your backyard, well, you'll find out how much you really own that. But come on. But Neil, of course, I mean, the guy's been employed by CBC for a large portion of his life, which, right, think about how the CBC gets its funding. By the wealth redistribution model, right? Publicly funded. Forcing Canadian tax serfs and slaves to pay for their incomes, right? It's not like they can be held to account where the people can withdraw their support. Canadians don't have any option to do such a thing. So Neil, which has functioned in that realm for so long, like I said, he just doesn't understand what it would be what it would mean to be a real genuine conservative, or say something like a libertarian per se, that's all about the individual and responsibility and private property, and, you know, not using forced wealth redistribution as a means to an end, or collectivism, right? Or forced subjugation. It's like, no, we don't want any of those people around because, yeah, well, I mean, he's taking care of himself and probably a lot of his cohorts or his counterparts, right? Jesus Christ. Who want to govern, not simply entertain. Yeah, right. Well, yeah, exactly. They're preachers of a different stripe, right? They want to be your political masters. Where an actual genuine conservative or a libertarian we just want to set out the rules and the laws, and you take care of yourself and your family, and, you know, the only thing we're really supposed to be here for, if you're talking about genuine conservatism or genuine libertarianism, in that they both agree, and as far as that goes, is take care of your shit, and the only you know, national defense, right? Borders, an army to protect the borders, kind of stuff. Law enforcement, right? You know, to be the arbiter of dispute, final arbiter of disputes. That's what a genuine conservative is supposed to be all about. So very, 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 very limited role for central planning collectivists, right? So for someone like Neil, it's, damn, I don't like these people, right? Well, Mr. Wonderful certainly deserves credit for self-awareness. In the end, Kevin O'Leary was sensible enough to realize Quebecers would probably not embrace any leader whose French is lousy to non-existent, especially someone who was born in Montreal and educated in Quebec, making him one of those remarkably arrogant Anglo-Quebecers from the last century who couldn't be bothered to learn their own province's official language. Even if conservatives had been foolish enough to make O'Leary leader, the prospect of O'Leary debating Justin Trudeau, possessor of one of the most famous names in Quebec history in French, is absurd. O'Leary seemed to recognize that Quebec matters, and as he put it, he just didn't have a path to beat Trudeau. So, listen, Neil, I know you're trying to paint that a little bit in a different manner, but O'Leary's basically admitting not only, I mean, think about it, the guy has all that wealth and all that charisma and all that stuff, but he still is humble enough to admit that, yeah, I mean, I have mad respect for someone that really should, I mean, a guy like O'Leary has a massive ego, but he still seems to have the ability or the capacity to be humble enough to admit that, yep, nope. So it's someone that has some critical thinking skills, at least, right? Can we not at least acknowledge that? Neil won't, no, because Neil lacks that concept completely. One suspects it had also begun to dawn on him that if he did win the leadership, he'd have to spend the next 2 years attending every rubber chicken dinner held by every conservative riding association in the country, shaking tens of thousands of hands. And if you ever seen what a right hand looks like after work in a room, you understand why some politicians carry a bottle of Purell with them. Anyways, this is just a more bunch of, Neil loves just rambling on about a bunch of nonsense. I think he likes to listen to himself speak, or the words that he writes down. He seems to turn himself on in that manner. But let's go down and see where we get to the meat of the article, right? Anyway, on his way out, the biggest shark in the tank endorsed Maxime Bernier, a charismatic MP from Beauce who had already consumed a lifetime's worth of rubber chicken and whose French is not just better, but more easily colloquial than Justin Trudeau's. Bernier, however, holds some pungently un-Canadian views, right? So Neil's basically trying to admit, but he's wrong, so wrong. Maybe the modern Canadian, maybe the modern Canadians who've been raised under the pretense or under the guise of state taking care of you, mommy, daddy, right? The collectivist types, but not genuine fucking Canadians. We live in a northern climate. So actually a lot of Canadians know very well how to be self-sustaining and all about the individual and family values. So, but anyways, like I say, Neil is such a failure on so many levels. He's a propagandist is what he is. He's a libertarian, meaning he believes in much less, not even more, government. Oh no, less theft, less oppression, less mandates, less edicts, less forced subjugation, less regulation. Oh, how dare he be that kind, right? Less mommy and daddy fucking putting their thumb on you, controlling every fucking aspect of your life, right? Oh, how dare he be that way? Canadians love to be oppressed and ruled by a domineering authoritarian ruling class, right? That's what fucking Neil's saying. And, you know, Canadians don't want to work hard to pay and sustain themselves. They much rather prefer using forced wealth redistribution as a means to an end. Like, what? Hey, that sounds something more along the lines of what you're like, Neil. Are you referring to Canadians as just yourself? Are you doing that portrayal thing, right? Oh, be careful there, because it's not like I don't know it, but you're going to let a whole lot of other Canadians know really what your psychology is all about if you keep putting forth and presenting this kind of narrative, Neil. Jeez. Getting too old, senility setting in? Mm-hmm. He has actually agreed, for example, with President Donald Trump's view that Canada's dairy and poultry marketing boards are unfair and markedly protectionist. Oh, you mean supply management? You mean like socialist or communist type of endeavors where you price fix and dictate the supplies, right? How dare he be against that? You know, especially in places like where I'm from in New Brunswick, where you got to pay fucking $78 for 3 or 4 liters of milk, right? When there's no actual genuine market fundamentals would suggest that these cows are worth that much, or that milk is worth that much. Maxime saying, I don't agree it's that much either. Let's let the market decide what the price of milk should be, right? Oh, we can't have that because we got a bunch of lobbyists, crony corporates that won't like that. They'd have to compete in the market, and they wouldn't do that. They'd fail. Oh, we can't have that. That's what they're saying. But don't worry. There's lots of people that have competitive spirits and that entrepreneurial zeal. We'll step in and take their place. Never fear. Never worry about that stuff. When they talk about, the world's going to come crashing down, economics are going, no, there's always going to be people that are willing to step in and take the place of these cronies. They're salivating. They're chomping at the bit, just waiting for the opportunity. Let me tell you that. I know that personally. Bernier wants to carve off whole sections of the federal government. That sounds so good. And abolish interprovincial protectionism. Oh, even better. Loving it. He thinks our healthcare system is abysmal and says so. Bless him. Yeah, right? If you got to wait all those months and months and months to get to your doctor or your healthcare provider, all that shit, or in the end, if your bed is stuck out in the hallway because they've overbooked and they don't have enough beds or resources to take care of you, right? Or maybe you die in the hallway, as we've already heard before and stuff too. Yeah, those kind of indignities are the kind of shit that fucking, I don't imagine there's a whole lot of Canadians that like that when it's presented to them in reality. He's an independent thinker, but how Bernier will convince sufficient numbers of Canadians, addicted as they are to protectionism and entitlements, to elect him prime minister is a bit of a mystery, right? So Neil's saying, that's hard work. Oh, you don't want that, man, that's hard work. You're going to have to force everyone to be self-sufficient and personally responsible and have to learn how to take care of themselves a little better. Neil's like, well, I wouldn't want to be put in that position. And I'm sure there's a lot of other Canadians that don't. Like I say, Neil, you're letting the psychological aspect of what's going on in your little brain out. You're letting that cat out of the bag, aren't you? The other breakout from the Conservative leadership pack is Andrew Scheer, a career politician with a big, golly grin, who presents himself as a uniter, as a full-spectrum Conservative, presumably meaning there's room for everyone in his tent. But Happy Andrew is a social conservative, anti-abortion, and does not believe in gay marriage, is anti-assisted suicide, and one of two Conservative leadership candidates who voted against the Liberals' transgender rights bill last fall. Scheer has promised he will not reopen debates on gay marriage or abortion, but he describes himself as a man of principle, and principled people tend to want to act on their principles. His French, barely passable, halting, and heavily accented. So if you believe polls, the two leaders in the Tory race are now a libertarian who believes in keeping government out of the people's lives, and a social conservative who, like all SoCons, presumably believes in legislating morality. Now that's liberals. Legislating morality? Think about it. LGBT acceptance and all that shit, and minorities and that. Who would be come on. Like I said, Neil's totally forgetting what the fucking leftards are doing in the modern era, right? Back in the day, you might have been able to put this kind of messaging forward and painted the Conservatives as being the ones that were the identity politics, right? The leftists have been taking that mantle and running with it for a long time now. Surely, though, a fair chunk of the near 250,000 party members who will cast votes are what used to be described as progressive conservatives, people who lean to the right on fiscal matters but are centrist socially. Centrist socially. Nice try, you dumbass. Listen, they're trying to push full-on collectivism. In reality, no. What genuine conservatives are doing, no, they want to go the libertarian way. Instead of going the socialist way, is no. Holding people more to account and personally responsible. That's the way to go. No. No more handouts. No more fucking freebies. No more pretenses of bullshit of forced collectivism and subjugation. Nice try, Neil. E for effort, F for fail in reality. Yeah, and let's get to this last little part here just to show you, just so in case you're unclear right now, let me clarify things a little bit further for you that Neil, they're trying to get a liberal in charge of the Conservative parties is really what they want. There are moderates like Lisa Raitt, a highly competent professional manager who has spent all her years in government as a Stephen Harper minister and who's working on her French, and Michael Chong, who resigned from Harper's cabinet over a government motion declaring Quebec a nation. He's also working on his French. Or there's Rick Peterson, who objectively has all the outsider qualifications that thrill the base nowadays. Like O'Leary, Peterson has never held election elected office. Like O'Leary, he spent his life getting rich in the financial sector. Like O'Leary, he wants to slash corporate taxes, something Canada will have to consider if Donald Trump does the same. Restructure personal income tax, eliminate regulatory obstacles to business, and introduce two-tier health care, which all other developed countries already have. But Peterson is also a pro-choice, pro-LGBT rights, pro-gay marriage, and supports the concept of assisted suicide. And one other thing, his French is excellent. Far better than any other Anglophone in the leadership race. He holds an advanced degree from Institut d'études politiques in France, where he once played professional hockey. The prospect of Peterson holding his own against Justin Trudeau in Quebec is not absurd. It's actually something I'd love to see. So, Peterson is a real, live, progressive conservative, someone who wants to govern, not entertain, whose focus is on the economy. So, what this is all telling us is Neil's already got it figured out. He doesn't want anything to do that anyone to rock the boat. Just keep the status quo going. We might tweak and tinker around the edges a little bit, but please, Canada, don't teach the Canadian people to stand up to themselves, to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, to reject big government and cronyism and all that shit. Please just keep the status quo going a little bit longer. That's what Neil's saying. Neil, you're such a loser, man. I can't even imagine anyone in your family, your neighbors, your offspring, co-workers. Well, maybe co-workers, because like I say, I look at the place where you chose to make your occupation of choice, right? But yeah, you know, Neil, if you ever see this video, you know the kind of people you have to surround yourself because of the path you chose to go down, right? That's why people like myself want nothing to do with you, or nothing to do with the rhetoric you espouse, or your progressive bullshit, collectivism, conservatism, or liberalism. We don't want nothing to do with any of your fucking bullshit, Neil. We just want our freedoms and our liberties, and we can take care of the rest. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.